country, when any government is appointing an ambassador, there is a security and a vetting process. That process is gone through by officials, and of course it was gone through for the appointment of Peter Mandelson. The truth is, all the issues were weighed, and in that time it was known that
while King Charles quietly navigates the ceremonial duties of the crown, down in Westminster, the political temperature has risen to an absolute boiling point. Before we dive into what might be the most explosive political confrontation of the year, hit that subscribe button because UK Connors is your front row seat to the drama that's tearing British politics apart. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. David Lammy has just thrown down the gauntlet in spectacular fashion, and this isn't your typical parliamentary spat. The Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister has accused Nigel Farage of nothing less than pound-shot patriotism, doubling down on claims that Reform's immigration plans are fundamentally racist. Let that sink in for a moment. The government's Justice Secretary is openly calling out the leader of Britain's fastest-rising political force as a fraud wrapped in the Union Jack. This is political warfare at its rawest, and it's happening right now. Here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. Lammy didn't just throw a casual insult across the dispatch box and walk away. He painted a vivid, unsettling picture of what he claims Reform's policies would actually mean for Britain. Round up and deport our French neighbors, our Indian colleagues, our Caribbean friends, people who already have indefinite leave to remain, people who've built lives here, worked in our hospitals, taught in our schools, run businesses on our high streets. Lammy is forcing the British public to visualize immigration enforcement not as an abstract policy debate, but as officers knocking on the doors of people they know, people they work with, people whose children play with their children. It's a devastating rhetorical strategy, and it's designed to make Reform's proposal feel not just harsh, but UN British. But before we accept Lammy's framing wholesale, let's look at what Nigel Farage actually proposed last week. Under Reform's plan, non-EU migrants will be forced to reapply for visas under stricter criteria. We're talking higher salary requirements and better standards of English. Now, Farage has been crystal clear that this targets people on time-limited visas, not those with indefinite leave to remain. So is Lammy deliberately misrepresenting the policy, or is there genuine confusion about what Reform is actually proposing? Because that distinction matters enormously. If you're here legally with settled status, are you really under threat, or is Labour creating a scare story to damage Reform's surging popularity? And let's talk about that popularity because the numbers are absolutely staggering. An Ipsos poll last week put Reform on 34% support. 34%. Labour is languishing at 22%. The Conservatives, once the natural party of government, are scraping along at just 14%. These aren't margins of error or statistical noise. This is a political earthquake that's reordering British politics before our eyes. Reform isn't a protest movement anymore. They're a genuine contender for power, and Labour knows it. Which brings us to a rather uncomfortable question. Is this principled opposition to racist policy, or is this panic from a government watching its support crumble? Keir Starmer himself waded into the fight during his BBC interview, kicking off Labour's annual conference in Liverpool by suggesting that deporting migrants who've been here for years, working lawfully, would tear our country apart. It's strong language from a Prime Minister who usually favours caution over confrontation. But Starmer is reading the same polls everyone else is, and he can see Reform breathing down Labour's neck. The political calculation is obvious. Labour needs to paint Reform as extreme, as UN British, as a threat to the social fabric. Because if they don't, they risk losing swathes of their own support to Farage's populist appeal. Nigel Farage, predictably, isn't taking this lying down. He fired back at the Daily Express, accusing Starmer of believing that anyone here on a time-limited visa is entitled to stay in Britain forever. His framing Labour as fundamentally opposed to border controls, suggesting they've given up on the very concept of managed immigration. And then comes Farage's killer line. He calls this a desperate attack from a man sinking in the opinion polls and leading a divided party. It's brutal, it's personal, and most importantly, it's not entirely wrong. Labour is sinking in the polls, and there are visible fractures within the party about how to respond to Reform's rise. Now, David Lammy isn't content to let Farage have the last word. At the Labour conference, he expanded his attack, describing Farage's approach as wrapping himself in our flag while promoting policies that don't match British values. This is the heart of Labour's strategy. They are not just saying Reform's policies are bad. They are saying they are fundamentally alien to what it means to be British. Lammy is attempting to reclaim patriotism from the populist right, arguing that true British values include tolerance, fairness, and respect for the rule of law, not mass deportations and hostile environment policies on steroids. But Lammy didn't stop there. He also took a swipe at the Conservatives, specifically Shadow Lord Chancellor Robert Jenrick, accusing him of attacking judges in ways that would make Winston Churchill shudder in his grave. Lammy positioned himself as a defender of judicial independence against populist attacks from both Reform and the Tories. He drew a sharp distinction between what he called real patriotism, standing up for the rule of law, and what he dismissed as Jenrick's approach of smearing our independent judiciary from a pub on social media. It's cutting, it's designed to wound, and it shows Labour is trying to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. What makes this particularly intriguing is Lammy's personal narrative. He spoke about growing up in the shadow of Tottenham's Broadwater farm estate during Thatcher's Britain, being stopped and searched by police, seeing too many people who looked like him ending up on the wrong side of the law. For Lammy, the Justice Secretary brief isn't just another ministerial portfolio. He described it as coming home, the culmination of a life spent thinking about justice, studying law, serving as a minister, leading reviews into racial disparities. This personal investment makes his attacks on Farage feel less like political opportunism and more like genuine conviction. Whether you agree with him or not, Lammy believes is defending something fundamental about Britain's character. The Justice Secretary also used his conference speech to hammer the previous Conservative government, pointing out that prisons were bursting at 99% capacity, courts had record backlogs, rape victims were waiting years for trials, and legal aid deserts existed across the country. His plan involves 3 pillars: rebuilding trust, modernizing justice with technology to reduce bureaucratic form-filling, and establishing punishment that works. But here's the tension. Lammy is simultaneously trying to fix a broken justice system while using his platform to wage political war against reform. Can he do both effectively, or will the political combat distract from the urgent work of reform? This confrontation reveals something profound about the state of British politics. We're watching a realignment in real time. The old certainties are gone. The Conservatives are in disarray. Labour is in government but losing public confidence at an alarming rate. And reform is surging forward, channeling frustration with immigration, cultural change, and political establishment complacency. Lammy's willingness to call Farage policies racist, to use inflammatory language about deportations and flag wrapping, shows that Labour has decided subtlety won't work. They are going for the jugular because they believe that if they don't define reform now, reform will define the political landscape for the next decade. But will it work? That's a question keeping Labour strategists awake at night. Because for every voter who's repelled by the idea of deporting settled migrants, there's another voter who thinks Britain's immigration system is broken beyond repair and that only radical solutions will fix it. Lammy is betting that British decency will ultimately reject reform's approach. Farage is betting that British frustration with the status quo will overwhelm concerns about the harshness of his solutions. One of them will be proven right, and the consequences will reshape British politics for a generation. The gloves are off, the battle lines are drawn, and this is only the beginning. UK Connors will be here tracking every twist, every attack, every counterpunch in what promises to be the defining political fight of our time. Subscribe now because you won't want to miss what happens